Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you, Joel, for the lovely introduction. Welcome everyone to this panel discussion at CTO CraftCon called Developer Happiness and the Downturn. Dun, dun, dun. So we have some great panelists lined up and some spicy questions that have already been submitted that we're going to talk about. How do you ensure developer happiness or think about developer happiness at a time of economic turbulence? So my name is Laura Tacho. I'm an engineering leadership coach and former VP of engineering. You can find out more about me at lauratacho.com. I'm joined here today by Cornel Fatulescu, who's the Chief Platform Officer at Pentalog, Abby Seneor, the CTO at Citibeats, and Andy Clarke, the CTO and co-founder at Evidenced. Before we get into the questions and the discussion about developer happiness and the downturn, I want to hand it over to each of the panelists to give a short introduction about their leadership journey and who they are. So Cornel, I'll go to you first.
Thank you, Laura, and I'm very happy to be here with you. So yeah, I've started my career when I was 15 years old. That was the moment when I had my first job as a developer. And I've done all sorts of jobs, developer, scrum master, product owner, engineering manager, CTO. I'm currently chief platform officer at Pentalog, meaning I'm in charge with products and technology aspects of our group strategy. I also have a CTO team that we work with and help our customers, more than 250 customers every year. And we help them to leave something behind after their mandate. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Cornel. Abby, we'd love to learn a bit more about you. All right. I think Abby's having some problems with her audio, unfortunately. Andy, why don't you take over while Abby gets her
No worries.
microphone sorted?
I'm one of the founders here at Evidenced. We're an interview intelligence platform helping teams scale their interviewing capacity. And prior to this, I ran an engineering consultancy helping lead teams building products from scratch, rescuing projects, and then also helping them to scale their teams. And that's where the idea for Evidenced came from.
Wonderful. Abby, are you back with us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Perfect. So first, it's a pleasure to be here. I fell in love with computer science when I was very young. I graduated when I was 14. And since then, I worked in big tech companies like Intel and Microsoft. I was leading team, but then I decided to go on my own adventure, and I founded my first startup, which I was a CTO. And then I had another one, which I was a CTO again, and now I'm a CTO in a size company, which I think is my sweet spot because you have the resources to do what you want, but that you still have the flexibility of a startup. So yeah, when I speak about developer happiness, it's from my own perspective as a developer in the past, but also as someone that is in charge of developers. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. I think this duality of our roles, as most of us who are in engineering leadership were engineers at some point ourselves as well, makes the topic of developer happiness particularly interesting because now we have that business side that we have to consider while also being in a position to make decisions. So those of you in the audience that have questions about developer happiness and the downturn, please add your questions at any time in the Ask a Question link that's below the video. We're going to kick off with a question that we talked about beforehand, which is how have high profile layoffs affected developer happiness and their perceptions of job security right now? Obviously, a very timely question that I'm sure is on everybody's mind. Andy, I'd like to go to you first for this question.
Yeah, sure. I think Heidi mentioned in her fireside chat that team changes are inevitable, but I think the wholesale team changes going on are kind of that are hitting the press, I guess, are kind of a little bit unnerving for anyone, whether you're in that organization or not. And I think the risk to us is, as in working in smaller organizations, is that there's a kind of a ripple effect of big tech is making big layoffs. That's putting a lot more kind of high quality engineers into the job market. That's a lot more competition for the roles that are there. Like you can see how minds might kind of extrapolate all of this. And I think the problem is it's hard to work out what's real and what's not, especially given that almost all of Elon's tweets are meme worthy, and you don't know whether it's made up or not. But at lunch, the engineering manager at Twitter, just perfect timing, and I got the opportunity to ask her, how real is this? And it was, yeah, it's real. But I think the risk is to just take it out of context, and I don't think the biggest risk for engineers right now is the layoffs. I think the biggest risk is that the hiring freezes that are going with it, and I think that's having the biggest impact on available jobs, the time to hire. All of that sort of stuff it's making everybody nervous about moving jobs, and it's making everybody nervous about losing their roles. I think it was a partner at Lightspeed Ventures did an article on this that actually the biggest impact to the kind of available jobs is not the layoffs, it is the hiring freezes. My view is that the optics look a lot worse than what it actually is, but it doesn't mean that your team are not going to be feeling nervous. Are we going to be making layoffs? That's going to be in the back of their mind. How financially stable are we as an organization? And I think to kind of sum up, or kind of, I think stereotype maybe, it's probably the VC hopping companies that are the ones that are going to be making the biggest changes to their workforce. So they're the ones that are constantly looking for that next raise. And someone has suddenly told them, oh, by the way, you might not get 200 million in 6 months. You might have to wait 12 or 18. And all of a sudden there's, a big sweeping change has to happen right now.
Yeah, I've often heard the current landscape being described as a market of two extremes, where we have big tech on one side with hiring freezes and layoffs, but then smaller companies, some of which might be the companies that the three of you work at, still trying to catch up from when big tech was hiring away all of the candidates. So Abby or Cornel, how, for you, in your experience, how does the reality of headline after headline of layoffs actually match up to the reality of your companies or companies in your network?
I will take this one if I may. So
Yeah, Abby.
I had to lay off some people recently, and it was really, really hard. So the hype is real, but probably it's overhyped, because although there is a layoff, but there is also these people are good people and they will find some other job. But I think the big key fronts, because human being afraid of what they don't know. And when there is unknown about what's going on with the company and probably what a runway looks like, then people are afraid and they make it much more than what it is. And I experienced that firsthand. And it was just when I sat with all the engineers and I explained them exactly the situation. And I also promised them that this layoff that we have is the last one and nobody is going anywhere. And the people that we lay off, we let them go with dignity. So there is also a way how to do things, and you also help you help the people to find something else, and that's at least what I try to do. So it is real, but at the same time, I think we need to be more transparent. Now, I don't know how it is with big tech. It's probably slightly harder, but I think with small medium companies, it's easier. And once people know where they stand, they can prepare. But it's really hard to prepare for an unknown future. It's much easier to prepare for something that you know, even if it's really difficult.
Yeah, thanks, Abby.
I'd
Cornel, do
also
you have
like to
something
say,
to? Yeah.
yeah, because I've been involved with, working with people that are affected to different teams, different customers since 2008. That was the period, and I've seen some crises. So we've also had COVID, and especially for us, we saw that some of our customers had trouble, so they reduced the teams and accordingly, some of our people also were unstaffed, but new demand came, and it was a matter of 2-3 months usually, not more than that. We didn't have an impact, no matter what happened, and we are talking about a company now today of 1,600 employees. So somehow there is balance here, and we see a reasonable dynamics. So there are things happening in some regions of the world, and some regions of the world are quite the opposite, which is interesting. So for those who are in a global condition, they might balance this better than others. So I think, yeah, usually we feel this for 2-3 months, and then everything goes back to normal. And even if we have a small percentage of customers that unstaff, then it's better in 3 months, so a quarter, kind of.
Yeah. Everything's a cycle, right? It all comes back. Yeah. Switching gears a bit, talking about the developer happiness part and not the downturn part, what factors do you all use to determine developer happiness? Cornel, I'll go back to you for this question to start off.
Yes, and again, it's a very long answer, so I'll have to squeeze that a bit. So there are 6 factors I'm looking at, and I'm strongly inspired from a happiness index of Denmark Institute, and they are togetherness, which is a sense of community. Teams, people need to feel a part of their teams, their culture, and also at home. There is health. Of course, and companies have limited space here to act. We shouldn't be too parental here. There are also some ethics behind it. There are financial aspects everyone talks about. They are linked to happiness, we want it or not. There is freedom, there is trust, and kindness. So from these 6 factors, all interconnected, I'm going to talk only about one, just to prove a point and how CTOs can leverage that. So freedom, for example, which is tightly linked with happiness, it's a matter of choice. So we feel like we have more freedom if we can choose. Now, if we have more choices, sometimes that's against happiness. So we, as CTOs, we need to take care of some sort of collaboration framework so that people have enough space so that they can also choose. That's the basic thing that we can do. We have, common tools, common events, and then there is space for you to commute less, adapt your schedule, things like this. So these are very important. Then there is something about the freedom of choice, but with responsibility. Like ensure that as a CTO, your team players, your team members know how to take decisions without harming the company. This is very important, because if they take the wrong decisions, they harm others, so we are unhappy, the others. So that's not going to help happiness. And then we can spend through something which is work-life balance, which is in the core of it, of course, because when you have stress in the personal life, that brings less options in professional life, and the other way around. So that's very important. And here there is a very interesting study, just using as an example, the Parenting Happiness Index, where UK, by the way, is not scoring that well. And that says that women feel less freedom because they have less options. They have less, for example, when they have kids, they need to take care of them and ensure if they go to work, someone takes care of the kids and things like this. And because they have less options, they have less freedom, and the less freedom turns out to be less happier people in the end. So if you want to take care of this, we need to look at it from also from a systemic perspective. There are things the state should take care of. There are things companies can take care of, and it's reasonable. And one last but not least is personal accountability here, because, for example, my personal approach to it is in professional development. I give lots of attention to skills development. So, for example, when you join Pentalog, from the start, you will be assessed a lot, you will test a lot, you will learn a lot, and that's fine. And it's a continuous process, because excellence is important when you take decisions. and we shouldn't repeat the mistakes of everyone. Many call that trial and error, and we learn and we adapt. But it's loss of unhappiness for many, because we lose some energy. So when people are better and they are more excellent, I'd say, in terms of hard skills, soft skills, they take better decisions. They feel they take decisions in a responsible manner, and they are happier because of that.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for laying out that that framework that you use. Andy, do you have a similar framework that you use, or how do you determine, what goes into developer happiness?
No, I think Cornell covered up pretty much everything that has been, I guess, involved in making teams happy over the kind of the time I've been working in teams. But I think to lay it out so clearly is awesome. I think to highlight the fact that the UK is not scoring very well on a happiness score is probably a bit uh, of an understatement, maybe. And I think the togetherness aspect is probably something that is ruining our kind of country at the minute, probably the divisive nature of the kind of mainstream press. But actually bringing it back to kind of work, I think making sure that teams are working on things together is so important. And I think that's been one of the failings that I've seen from an engineering team point of view, is when we've gone off and built something where there hasn't been alignment with the rest of the business, whether that's the sales teams or anything like that. And it's all about kind of making sure that we are aligned with what the end goal is, and we are working towards that goal, whether the sales team are selling things that we haven't quite built yet and the engineers are happy with that. And it's all about that communication and making sure that teams are working together.
Hmm. Yeah, great point, Andy. Thanks for sharing that. Cornel, you also touched on something that leads into the next question here. You mentioned that choice is really important, but sometimes companies can't allow individual employees to have all of the choice in the world. And sometimes there's this conflict between developer happiness and business goals. And Abby, I wanted to ask you, is developer happiness diametrically opposed to business success, or can you have both of them at the same time?
That's a tough question, and I will rephrase it a little bit. And I will say that it's not about developer happiness, it's about people happiness in general in the company. And I personally believe that there is no business, it's all about people, and people should always cost. So you don't build a business, you build the people, and the people build the business. So yes, of course, numbers matter, technology matters, right? We are CEOs, so CTO, so of course we care about technology. Efficiency matter, but they don't matter as much as people matter. And if we want the business to succeed, then we need to understand the real value of people. And I mean, for me, it's really that simple. I would put people in front of before business decision every time. And I know that sometimes, and it happened to me a few times, it contradicts a business decision. For me, the choice is always very clear. I will protect the people, their dignity, their value before business decision. And yeah, I don't know if it's the right decision every time, and sometimes it's not. And that's why I always say that I probably will not make the best CEO, because I care less about the money and more about, okay, my people, because I know that in the end, the business that we have is all about the people. If they will leave, there is a saying that says, never push a loyal person to a point that they don't care anymore. And I think sometimes we get so caught up, especially in startups, when you go through stressful times of funding rounds, and you don't meet the sales goal. And it's very easy to get caught up in the numbers and even treat people as numbers. And it always get back to you and bite you. So for me, there is no question here. It's people will always come first, and even before business. But I know that it is slightly controversial opinion, so I'm happy to hear from Andy and Cornel.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think there's lots of people who agree with you strongly. A lot of people that wish they worked for you. Probably hearing hearing you explain that. Cornell, what's your opinion here?
Yeah, I think it's good to take care of people happiness, but there is a law in happiness that says that we cannot have all the people every time happy. So it's a law. It just doesn't work. So we'll always have some people unhappy at different moments. So maybe that says something about the way that we are not wired to be happy. So now let's see at the company how much responsibility we should give to a company to ensure people are happier than they can work themselves on. So there is something here to be worked on all the levels. There is an interesting philosopher, a French philosopher called Felix Guattari, saying that in order to have a good environment, you need to take care of the ecology of the environment, but there is something before that. It's ecology of the society, and before that it's ecology of the mind. So everyone, how they, and you need to work on all these levels, but you can't work on the ecology of the mind at the company level. That's not ethical in many regards. So there are things that are reasonable to be done and things which aren't. And there is a law, in my opinion, in terms of the way business works. It's not meant to, of course, we should avoid figures, people as figures, but businesses aren't created, unfortunately, for people happiness, but to solve problems and to inflict change to other businesses, which is change and hurts everyone. So, in a sense, every business out there is creating change to other businesses and hurts other people. So we can do that with a very happy team, hurting other people in a sense. But this is very important. We can't achieve people happiness at 100%. And but after crisis, we kind of become all happy. So after COVID, we were happier. Those who weren't touched and those who healed from COVID, they were happier. And I think after a crisis like maybe the one we are facing right now, we will be happier, all of us, because it passed. But there are limited things we can do about it also. We should be reasonable. Being unreasonable with what we can do makes us unhappy. It's very important. As a CTO, you can't control all the aspects.
Great. Thanks for that perspective, Cornell. We're going to squeeze in one final question. And Andy, I'll send this one your way. This is a question from the audience. Are you constantly acknowledging wider issues like COVID and redundancies and providing support? Or do you not dwell on those issues and try to just move forward? How do you find that balance?
I think if you don't acknowledge them, I think you're at risk of just sweeping them under the carpet and kind of blindly carrying on. When COVID hit, I was still working as a consultant, helping a team, which is part of Shell Digital Ventures, and actually they dealt with the kind of the lockdown very quickly and very efficiently, and really nurtured and cared for the staff. It was a big change from going from being in the office, and we all went through this, but we were working on a mobile app, and it was just little things like having test devices available. They were immediately shipped out. It's just little things like that that meant that people could continue, the engineers could continue to work on what they were working on and enjoying working on, even if they couldn't work next to the person that they were working next to a week before. So yeah, I wouldn't. My view is I'm generally quite an open person. I will share, and I think sharing your being together in that kind of crisis is part of kind of moving forwards and getting through it together, and that will help to bond the team.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. It's so important not to skirt over things, but also not to dwell on them and find that perfect balance if that exists. So, thanks to Andy, Cornel, and Abby for this lovely discussion on some not so lovely topics. If you have other questions, I think everyone here is very friendly. So find us on Twitter, find us on the CTO Craft community. I think we're happy to continue the conversation elsewhere. Thank you all, and I'll hand it back to Joel.